They're not just hopeful, they're uplifted. Why? Because they've uncovered something so extraordinary, so empowering, that it has changed everything. This isn't about struggle, fear, or doubt anymore. It's about experiencing love, peace, and unshakable strength. You see, the moment they embraced this divine truth, everything changed. Their hearts overflowed with God's love, and their lives were transformed by His endless wisdom, strength, and abundant blessings. Hello, beloved of the Lord. It's no coincidence you're here today. This is a moment orchestrated by God Himself, a divine calling for you to step into the life you were always meant to live. Let me ask you, have you felt like no matter how much you try, no matter how hard you pray, you're still stuck? Does it feel like the same struggles keep repeating, whether it's bills piling up, health battles, or broken relationships? Listen closely. It's not your fault. The enemy has worked tirelessly to block your blessings and keep you trapped in fear and doubt. But here's the truth. You are a child of the Most High God. You were born for victory, wealth, health, and peace. And now you're about to discover why this group of uplifted people holds the key for you. To break free from the chains of bad luck and negativity, and to open your life to a flood of wealth, abundance, and success, almost effortlessly in just 47 seconds a day. This is your time, beloved. In the next few moments, you'll learn how to step into the divine blessings that have always been meant for you. Hello, dear one. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Pastor Wade Wilson. Though the very idea of me being a pastor still feels like a miracle. People come to me now for guidance, prayer, and wisdom. But let me tell you, my journey to this point wasn't just unexpected. It was downright impossible. Years ago, I was the last person you'd ever imagine in this role. I wasn't just a skeptic. I was a man who had given up on the very idea of hope. I grew up in crushing poverty. My family lived in a crumbling old house that leaked every time it rained. The walls were thin, and so was the hope inside them. My parents worked tirelessly, often juggling multiple jobs just to keep food on the table and the electricity on for a little while at least. But it always seemed like the harder they worked, the more the world pushed back. Bills piled up faster than paychecks came in. We faced endless evictions, repossessions, and medical crises that drained every penny we had. I remember nights when the fridge was empty and my mom would pretend she wasn't hungry so I could have the last piece of bread. I remember the shame of wearing the same tattered clothes to school, hoping no one would notice. And I remember the prayers my parents whispered at night, desperate cries for a breakthrough that never came. By the time I became an adult, I had learned one thing. Life is a struggle, and faith changes nothing. I thought I could outwork the hand I'd been dealt. I took the first job I could find, a grueling factory job where the shifts were long and the pay was insulting. The boss was a tyrant, always ready to remind us how replaceable we were. But I stayed because I thought hard work was the answer. I stayed late, worked weekends, and sacrificed everything in the hope that one day things would get better. But they didn't. Every paycheck seemed to vanish the moment it hit my bank account. Bills, rent, and emergencies ate up every dime, leaving me with nothing but exhaustion and frustration. And the people around me? They were no better. Co-workers gossiped behind my back, throwing me under the bus at every chance they got. One of them, someone I thought I could trust, sabotaged a project I was working on just to make themselves look better. As if that wasn't enough, my personal life was falling apart too. My wife, Lauren, grew bitter over our struggles. She would say things like, "Look at how other men provide for their families. Why can't you be like them?" Her constant criticism ate away at me. Every argument felt like a knife to the heart, and every day the distance between us grew wider. Eventually, the fights turned into silence. The love we once had was replaced by resentment, and before I knew it, Lauren walked out. She left me, taking everything with her. But the worst part? My mother fell gravely ill. She had always been my rock, my unwavering source of strength. Even when everything else seemed to fall apart, she would say, "Steve, God has a plan for you. Don't give up." But then came the diagnosis. Terminal. 3 months left to live. The doctors were clear. There was nothing they could do except make her comfortable. Every word felt like a knife to the heart. I couldn't breathe as they explained how the disease would slowly take everything from her. And the worst part? We couldn't afford the care she needed. I spent sleepless nights by her side, holding her hand, pretending to be strong. But inside I was shattered. How could I watch the one person who had always believed in me, who had sacrificed everything for me, slip away? One cold evening, as I sat beside her hospital bed, she looked at me with tearful eyes and whispered, "Don't give up, Steve. God will make a way." Her words haunted me. I wanted to believe her, but how could I? How could God allow this? How could a loving father leave us to suffer like this? Every breath she struggled to take felt like a reminder of my failures. I couldn't provide. I couldn't save her. And now I was watching the one person I loved most slowly fade away. At my lowest point, I was jobless, penniless, and homeless, wandering the streets in desperation. I had hit rock bottom. Every door seemed to close in my face. Every effort led to failure, and my prayers felt like they were falling on deaf ears. One evening, as I aimlessly walked through the dimly lit streets, I stumbled upon an old church. It was small, weathered, and almost hidden, tucked away from the busy city. I was drawn to it, as though something unseen was calling me. The doors creaked open, revealing an empty sanctuary dimly lit by flickering candles. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and incense, and the atmosphere felt holy. I hesitated, then stepped inside. Sitting in the front pew was an old man, his figure bathed in the soft glow of the candlelight. He had an air of peace about him, like he carried a stillness that the world couldn't touch. He looked up as I entered, his eyes warm and kind. "Mind if I sit with you?" I asked hesitantly, unsure why I felt compelled to approach him. He smiled gently, motioning for me to join him. For a while, we sat in silence. The stillness of the church was almost overwhelming, pressing against the noise of my own thoughts. Then he spoke, his voice soft but filled with authority. "You seem lost, my friend," I scoffed. Lost is an understatement. My life is falling apart. I've tried everything, working harder, praying more, but nothing works. I've hit dead end after dead end. I'm exhausted. He nodded as though he had heard this story 1,000 times before. "Life can be harsh," he said, "but sometimes what we need isn't more effort, it's a change in our spirit." I frowned, bitterness creeping into my tone. A change in spirit won't pay my bills. It won't fix my life. He leaned closer, his eyes filled with compassion. "Perhaps not directly, but it can open doors you didn't even know existed." With that, he reached into his satchel and pulled out a small ancient scroll. "This," he said, "is no ordinary prayer. It is a gift infused with divine power. These words have been passed down through generations, a sacred prayer that connects directly to the heart of God." I stared at the scroll, skeptical. "And you think this is going to solve all my problems?" He smiled, unshaken by my doubt. "This isn't about magic or quick fixes. It's about realigning your life with God's divine plan. It's about opening your heart and your spirit to the blessings that have been waiting for you all along." This prayer speaks directly to the heavens, calling forth peace, abundance, and favor. "But there's something you must understand," he continued, his tone growing serious. "Many people feel abandoned by God, but they don't realize that it's their own fear and despair that block his blessings. This prayer breaks those chains. It opens the floodgates of divine favor." As he handed me the scroll, I felt an unexplainable warmth radiate through my hands. The words on the parchment were like nothing I'd ever seen. They seemed alive, filled with a power I couldn't describe. "This prayer," he said, "is a bridge between heaven and earth. When you speak these words with faith, they will summon God's presence into your life. Peace will replace your despair. Opportunities will arise where none seem possible. Miracles will unfold before your eyes." Despite my doubt, I unrolled the scroll and read the words aloud. As I spoke, a warmth washed over me. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The fear, the bitterness, the despair that had consumed me began to dissolve, replaced by a profound sense of calm and clarity. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I turned to thank the man, but he was gone. The pew where he had been sitting was empty. I looked around the church, calling out, but there was no trace of him. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. I stared at the scroll in my hands, trembling. Was he an angel? A messenger from God? I didn't know. But one thing was certain, our encounter was real, and so was the power of the prayer he had given me. And from that moment on, my life began to change in ways I never could have imagined. At first it was subtle. On the second morning after receiving the prayer script, I awoke with a strange sense of peace. The crushing heaviness that had plagued me for months seemed to have lifted just a little. I noticed my mother smiling for the first time in weeks. Though her illness was still present, her strength seemed to be returning in small but undeniable ways. "Steve," she said softly that evening, "whatever you're doing, don't stop. I can feel something different." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I hadn't told her about the prayer, but she could feel it. It gave me the courage to keep going. Then on the third day, something miraculous happened. I received an envelope at the abandoned train station where I had been sleeping. It was from a charity organization I didn't even remember signing up for. Inside was a prepaid card loaded with $1,000. I couldn't believe my eyes. It felt like a dream. That money was enough to buy food for my mother, pay for medicine her insurance couldn't cover, and even rent a small warm room for us to stay in. But the blessings didn't stop there. The very next day, something even more incredible happened. As I walked to the pharmacy to get her prescription, I noticed a crisp, folded $100 bill lying on the sidewalk. I looked around, expecting someone to claim it, but the street was completely empty. It was as if God himself had placed it there, knowing exactly what I needed. I used it to stock up on groceries for the week and buy a few warm clothes for my mother and me. Then, the breakthrough I had been praying for came. Later that week, I ran into an old acquaintance from school who I hadn't seen in years. After catching up, I explained my situation, and to my shock, he immediately offered me a job at his company. "I don't know why, but I feel like you're the right person for this position," he said. The pay? 3 times of my previous monthly salary. It was enough to not only cover all my expenses, but to finally start saving for the future. I felt like God himself had orchestrated that meeting, knowing it would pull me out of the pit I had been trapped in for so long. And then the floodgates opened. Within days, blessings started pouring in from every direction. I found an unclaimed lottery ticket tucked inside a newspaper someone left behind at the train station. It had won $5,000. A stranger at the grocery store overheard me talking about my mother's health and handed me an envelope saying, "God told me to bless you." Inside was $500 in cash. While helping a neighbor with their broken-down car, they insisted on paying me $200 even though I didn't ask for anything. One night, as I checked my email on a public computer, I saw a message from a company I'd never heard of. They informed me that I had been selected for a financial aid program, and they deposited $10,000 directly into my bank account. I didn't question it. I knew this wasn't random. This was divine intervention. It was like every corner I turned, God was waiting with another blessing. I wasn't just getting by anymore, I was thriving. For the first time in my life, I felt like the barriers that had always held me back were gone. The prayer I had been reciting every day wasn't just changing my life, it was transforming it. These blessings weren't coincidences. They were the result of aligning myself with God's divine flow. His word in Deuteronomy 28:12 came alive before my eyes. "The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in season and to bless all the work of your hands." And it wasn't just about money. I even began to notice subtle changes in my mother. Her energy was returning. She smiled more often, and her strength seemed to grow with each passing day. The doctors, who had given her only 3 months, started calling her progress remarkable. But the most unexpected blessing came in the form of love. One evening, as I sat in a small cafe, organizing my thoughts and counting my blessings, a woman approached me. She was radiant, kind, and had an aura of peace about her. We started talking, and something clicked instantly. Her name was Sarah, and she seemed to see through the brokenness I had once carried. Over time, our bond grew stronger. She became not just my partner, but a beacon of faith and hope in my life. She loved my mother as though she were her own, often helping me care for her as she continued to recover. Finding Sarah felt like a divine gift. Proof that God wasn't just restoring my life. He was building it into something I never imagined possible. Within weeks of chanting the prayer, my life was unrecognizable. The blessings were overwhelming. It was like everything I touched turned to gold. But it wasn't just about the material wealth, it was about the deep peace and assurance I now carried. The prayer had become more than just words. It was a bridge to something greater, a connection to the divine, a reminder of Matthew 7:7-8. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. I wasn't just receiving, I was becoming someone new. My faith deepened with every blessing, my heart grew with every miracle, and my gratitude expanded with every moment. My mother, the woman I thought I would lose, became my greatest testimony. The doctors called her recovery a miracle, but I knew it was more than that. It was God's hand, working through her life and mine. And as I stood by her bedside one afternoon, she smiled at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I told you God would make a way." Today I live in abundance financially, emotionally, and spiritually. I've found love, restored my family, and connected with a God who was waiting for me all along. And I know this. The prayer Michael gave me wasn't just about wealth. It was about opening the floodgates of heaven. It was about breaking through every chain, every barrier, and stepping into the life God had always intended for me. One quiet evening, as I sat by the window of my modest living room, gazing at the star-filled sky, I reflected on the miraculous transformation in my life. The atmosphere suddenly shifted. A radiant, warm light filled the room, enveloping me in its glow. I turned, and there stood Michael, transformed. His magnificent wings shimmered with divine brilliance, and his presence was powerful yet calming. "Steve," he said, his voice filled with celestial authority, "I have been sent to guide you. The blessings you've received are part of God's greater plan. Now it is time for you to step into your true calling." I stood awestruck as Michael's wings cast a soft, shimmering light across the room. His presence was overwhelming yet peaceful, filling the space with a divine energy I could feel in my very soul. "Steve," he said, his voice resonating like a heavenly choir, "the blessings you've received are not just for you. They are a part of God's sacred plan. The trials you faced were to prepare you for something greater. Now it is time for you to use your gifts for His purpose." I sank into the chair by the window, my mind racing. "But what am I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I've given so much already. I've helped my family, supported others, and shared what I have. What more can I do?" Michael's expression softened, and his voice was gentle but firm. "It's not just about giving money or possessions. It's about giving yourself your time, your compassion, and your wisdom. It's about connecting with others, guiding them, and helping them see the path God has laid before them. You are called to lead, to shepherd, and to bring others to God's sacred promise." The realization struck me deeply, like a light shining into my soul. "But how?" I whispered. "How do I begin?" Michael smiled, his wings glowing with divine brilliance. "You are destined to be a pastor, Steve," he said. "Your mission is to lead others to the light, to help them find their way, just as you were guided. This is God's purpose for your life." As he spoke, the room seemed to glow even brighter. Michael began to fade, his wings folding gracefully around him like a cocoon of light. "Remember," he said, his voice echoing as if from a distance, "you are never alone. I will always be with you, guiding and supporting you as you fulfill your calling." And just like that, he was gone. The moment was transformative. The message was clear. I wasn't just meant to receive blessings, I was called to lead others to their own. From that day forward, I dedicated myself to this mission. I established God's sacred promise, a sacred prayer where we could come together and grow in faith and abundance. This isn't just a prayer, it's a lifeline to the blessings God has always intended for you. God's sacred promise is a divinely inspired prayer script designed to connect you with the abundance of heaven and transform your life in ways you never imagined possible. With this prayer, you'll tap into the infinite power of God to attract overflowing wealth, no matter your current circumstances. Experience miraculous healing, even for illnesses deemed incurable. Restore and rebuild loving relationships, creating unshakable bonds. You are not meant to struggle. God's word promises in John 10:10, "I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly." Now it's your time to step into that abundant life. Here's why God's sacred promise works. This sacred script doesn't require years of spiritual knowledge or complex rituals. It's a simple yet profound prayer, crafted to align your heart and spirit with God's divine plan. And it's so easy to begin. Once you gain access to God's sacred promise, you'll immediately receive the prayer in a convenient digital format. It's always with you, ready to unlock the blessings waiting for you. And here's the miraculous part. It takes only 45 seconds a day to activate. That's it, only 45 seconds to open the floodgates of heaven and call down God's blessings into your life. It's simple, yet the results will leave you in awe. As you recite this prayer daily, you'll begin to feel a shift in your life. The energy of God's love and favor will surround you. Doors that were once closed will open wide. Opportunities will appear where you least expect them. Your health will improve in ways that defy explanation. Imagine waking up free from pain, renewed with strength and filled with vitality. Even conditions deemed hopeless by doctors can be touched by God's healing hand. Financial struggles will fade away. Bills that once felt impossible to pay will vanish. Unexpected checks, promotions, and prosperity will flow into your life effortlessly. And the relationships you thought were lost, they will be restored. Broken bonds will heal, and love will flourish like never before. With God's sacred promise, you don't have to wonder or hope for a better life. It's within your reach right now. The Bible assures us in Matthew 21:22, "Whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith." This is your moment to claim the blessings God has always intended for you. No complicated rituals, no hours of meditation, just a simple prayer script that will transform your life in 45 seconds a day. It's important that I share something from the heart. Yes, there is a contribution involved in stepping into this divine journey with God's sacred promise. But let me make one thing abundantly clear. This is not about buying God's favor. That idea runs counter to everything the gospel teaches us. This is a partnership about aligning your heart with His kingdom's work. It's about sowing into something far greater than ourselves, a mission to glorify God and spread His love to a world desperately in need of His light. The act of investing in God's sacred promise is an act of faith. It signifies your readiness to embrace the abundance and success that God has waiting for you. As Jesus said in Luke 6:38, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." This isn't about a transaction, it's about trust. When you take that step of faith, you're demonstrating your belief in God's promises and your willingness to align with His plan for your life. Let me emphasize, not a single cent is for personal gain. This ministry exists solely to serve God's kingdom and fulfill His purpose. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Imagine the faces of children whose bellies are empty, whose eyes are filled with sadness, and whose futures seem uncertain. These children look to the world with hope, waiting for someone to extend God's love. When you step into God's sacred promise, you're helping to feed those children, provide for their needs, and give them a glimpse of His infinite love through charitable initiatives. But it's not just about giving to others, it's about receiving the tools to transform your own life. This is a sacred partnership with God, where your faith and your giving ignite His divine plan for your abundance, health, and relationships. Your invitation to join this movement. When you join God's sacred promise, you're not just purchasing a prayer script, you're becoming part of a community committed to lifting each other up, spreading God's light, and experiencing His miraculous blessings. This is about faith, not obligation, a joyful response to His goodness, not compulsion. As we are reminded in Matthew 5:16, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Listen closely, beloved child of God. Right now you stand at a crossroads, and the decision you make today could alter the course of your life forever. There are only two choices before you. 1. Turn away. You could close this page, walk away and continue on the path you've been on. But I must warn you, by rejecting this divine opportunity, you risk remaining in the same struggles you've been facing. The weight of financial burdens, the constant battles with uncertainty, and the feeling of being stuck in the same cycle of frustration could persist. You may wonder why nothing ever changes. Or, 2. Say yes to God's divine plan. You can take action right now and embrace this rare opportunity that God Himself has placed before you. By doing so, you'll unlock the blessings that have always been waiting for you. You'll gain access to the tools and the guidance to step into a life filled with abundance, joy, and peace, the life God intended for you to live. And you can do this simply by clicking the Access Now button below. God believes in your potential, your strength, and your faith. He knows you are ready to break free from the chains of struggle and step into His blessings. You may be thinking, I don't have the funds to invest in this program, but hear me when I say this. The Lord has guided you here because He knows you can make it happen. He sees your potential and your readiness for this transformation. He doesn't lead His children where He won't provide. This is a step of faith, a leap into the arms of His promise. This is your divine moment. Don't let it slip away. Click now and begin your journey to a life filled with God's blessings, favor, and abundance.